Welcome to 122 and an eighth. This is Cowabunga Chronicles. I'm your sewer rat, Chris, joined by
Nolan.
and we are here to explore the sewers of the TMNT IDW collection. This is Volume 2, Splinter.
Take your thread, Total.
Awesome. So excited to be here. Cowabunga, Nolan.
Cowabunga, Chris.
Awesome. Volume 2. We're picking up steam a little bit. That's for sure. What was your first initial reactions to Volume 2?
I liked it. I didn't like it as much as Volume 1.
Okay.
I feel like it was more tonally all over the place.
Okay.
More, I guess, dramatic shift in what's going on. Because it goes from grounded to intergalactic to grounded again, and it's just...
And it has that, I think we talked about in the first volume bit, that like jumping back and forth kind of thing happening, literally by the page turn.
Yeah.
That is not always the easiest to follow, but you have to get used to. I think the biggest thing with this volume for me was the first volume really like crescendoed in a really like, this makes sense to end here kind of way. And we'll talk about where I think like the climax of this volume is. There's a handful, I think it's like six issues, I think, after the climax. And so it just, to me, felt a little bit different, where it was like, oh, this was such a great ending, and I want to hear what happens next once it happens next, but I got to read these 6 issues first.
Yeah.
Which are important in their own right, and that kind of thing, and the pacing. But I was just a little surprised by that, like, breakpoint choice. Other than that, I really liked the world building, the exploring. Yes, the intergalactic part is its own kind of thing, but we have a couple of things paying off, I think, from the first volume.
Interesting revelations I wasn't expecting.
Yes, absolutely. So hopping right into it, we hear a little bit about Casey Jones's backstory.
Yeah.
And I also think we're starting to see a pattern, especially in this volume, of what these one-shots are all about. These character one-shots are all about.
Yeah.
And that it's the character telling their own story. It is that inner monologue throughout them. I think we're seeing that pattern continue. And that, picks up right now with, Casey Jones. Hear more of his backstory. But also some parallels with Splinter I thought were really interesting, and that he promised his mother that he would protect his dad. And Casey just kind of struggles because his dad is now a drunk and abuses him, but he still made this promise. But I thought it was an interesting parallel, his mother's, dying wish, was a promise that, somebody alive would keep.
Yeah.
Very similar to Splinter's. What were your thoughts on that issue?
I really like the issue. I didn't actually make the connection that
Okay.
I don't know how, now that you say it, feels very obvious, but I really like this issue a lot. Everything with Casey is great for me.
And more than we've ever really gotten, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the big thing with Casey. It was just like he was a brute. He was Raphael's kind of foil, but buddy, man of arms kind of thing. But now we're hearing backstory. We're hearing who he considers family, how he sticks up for people. Even the eventual love interest of April O'Neil seems like a little bit more grounded or founded. Or earned, I think is the word you used before.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was just kind of like, oh, there's a male character, there's a female character, like, you two are meant for each other.
Yeah.
This feels a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting with these books or these issues rather, how important the one-shots are.
Yes.
To the point where it would be bizarre to read the main series without the context of the other issues, because the Casey Jones issue goes directly into the next
I actually have that
issue.
in my notes that like the ending leads right into issue 13. I think there are a few of the one shots you can take it or leave it. Like there's a few of them to me like you can live without, but for the vast majority of them, absolutely,
Yeah.
they are timed right in the story. And as we've talked about before, that's what makes this omnibus and this IDW collection just really the definitive way to read these, because otherwise you are out there collecting single issues. And as someone who was just staring at my collection last night, it is just wild. I'm in the single issue game and I'm trying to collect them all, but the number of different series and things like that, even if I had them all, there's still not a way to definitively read through each issue and know where they slot into each other.
Yeah, this is one of those series that I feel like the issues you want to collect for collecting, but to read it, you'll want to get the collections.
Welcome to my life, Nolan. That's it. That's how you got roped in. Awesome.
Yeah.
So as we were talking about Casey Jones leading right into issue 13, and that is Casey showing up beaten by his dad. Pretty bad.
Yeah.
And we encounter Raphael's, I think, worst rage so far, like most rage
Yeah,
to
I'd say
date.
so.
And he takes off to Casey's house to confront Casey's father. Splinter chases after him. And I really think this is one of the, these couple of issues handling this situation is one of the coolest, character developments and moments, because there has been a little bit of distance from Raphael with Splinter, just that more than the others. Not that it's far, but it's just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. I have this family and this guy Casey who, that brother in arms kind of thing, as I mentioned. But these next few issues with him and Splinter is fantastic. So Splinter chases after him. Really fun moment in this issue is April showing up with the donuts. And the reason I mention that is because of the pre-fight ceremonial donuts from that Mikey has with Chaka and Razar in the TMNT movie, where they try to poison with the nitrous oxide, and they try to poison Taka and Razar and knock them out. He shows up with a box of donuts. To me, it just felt very reminiscent of that. Who knows if that's intentional, but that just made me laugh.
Now that you mention it, I vaguely remember that, but before you specified, I was so confused.
Yeah, absolutely. We cut to Karai training after her defeat with Splinter. And that's where we learn that Shredder has decided that he needs a new second in command. And we cut back to Casey kind of explaining that he feels bad for not telling April. And then we cut to a drugged Stockman who he left drugged, and he wakes up on Burnout Island with Krang. Raphael attacking Casey's father, just kind of raging out. And this issue ends on a cliffhanger with Splinter stopping Raphael and him saying, literally, "Let me show you." And so there are so many things happening in this. It feels like it's almost as if you watched a season of a show, and the first episode of the new season has a catch up episode, like a recap episode, right?
Yeah.
And so it felt like this issue is let's touch base with everyone, but we still are going to propel the story a little bit.
Yeah.
So what were your thoughts on that issue?
The Casey Jones stuff in these issues, I agree with you, are incredible. They are top tier. It makes me excited for Jason Aaron's run, because in his Thor, he's had similar type things with Thor.
Okay.
So it makes me excited to see what will happen there. But I just really loved the stuff with specifically Raph and Splinter. The stuff with Karai is also good.
Sure.
And I do like the stuff with April coming back and Casey and the rest of the turtles sort of talking about what's been going on.
Right. And to sort of agree with their, like, the Karai and Shredder, even though they had their big battle, right, at the end of Volume 1, you can tell that's, like, almost an intentional, like, slow burn.
Yeah.
In the background. Like, they're building up to something big there. But it is, for now, like, in the background a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't read all of Volume 3 yet, but it seems like that will really start to pay off in Volume 3.
Yeah, for sure, especially the way this one ends. So we're on that cliffhanger of let me show you, and so I was really, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, I just immediately turned the page. I specifically remember that. But we dive in 14 with Splinter telling a story about how he also has blind rage that Raphael can have sometimes, but that was balanced by Shen, his wife.
Yeah.
And then we cut quickly to Burndown Island. Krang is explaining the Utram race and Dimension X, which are their own series, a side series. Dimension X has its own run.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Utram, Battle of Utram has its own run, I think, as well. There's actually, I think you've seen Mutant Mayhem. Is that
Yes,
correct? Yeah,
I've
and
seen
there's
it.
actually a theory that Cynthia Utram is actually Krang. That if you look at the costuming of Cynthia, it looks very similar to the Krang of like the 1987 animated series, just in the
Yeah.
style. So interesting note there. And then while he's explaining all this and his master plans and everything on Burn Now, that all of a sudden there are these intruders that come out of nowhere that enter through a portal to try to kill Krang. And this issue is also the first appearance of the Technodrome, in this series anyways. I don't know about you, but I had a Technodrome when I was a kid. I regret not having it anymore. These things are now worth like $400, $500 minimum if they're complete.
I'm sure you'll have it again one day.
Maybe one day. But, I mean, the thing opened up. It had, like, its own vehicles to it. That was the most fun toy. I mean, the thing was massive. Like, they do not make toys that large anymore.
I feel like I may have seen it before.
It's got that big eye on the top and everything. I mean, it was straight out of the series.
Yeah.
At least the model of that toy. So, yeah, that always brings me back when I see the Technodrome, that's for sure. So Casey's still hurt, but he tells the other three that they really need to appreciate their lives more. I thought that was a really interesting moment for Casey, telling, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello that, like, even though you have your doubts about things and that kind of, because they each had their own apprehensions to some degree about this whole reincarnation thing and these stories and whatnot, that they really need to appreciate it a little bit more because of Casey's experience. So we cut back to Splinter and Raphael, and Splinter spares the guy's life, and Raphael agrees, and gives this out that the other option is that Casey is going to be staying with them from now on. And so this is really that, genesis of him being, the fifth turtle in a lot of ways, I think. So what's interesting is you see him spare a life only for them to return. And then he sits all of them down to explain that while we will not kill, that is the last resort in all cases, we do need to resolve that they will need to kill Shredder.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting dichotomy, that, like, he has a line, but he even understands that it can be blurred I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
With this issue ending on Shredder believing that Leonardo is his proper heir, or new second in command, that they need to bring in.
Yeah, wasn't it? Didn't Karai play a part in that, or did Shredder just send Karai after? I can't recall.
Shredder sends Cry to go after Leonardo. She kind of drags her feet, and that's talked about a little bit later on,
Okay.
and that kind of thing. But he has some story where he believes that Leonardo is his second in command, really, which is very. I thought it was very jarring. It didn't seem like it justified itself, and that kind of thing. But at the same time, he's Shredder.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, there was at least some degree set up because of their interaction in Leonardo's one-shot last volume and then in the big final confrontation at the end of the last volume as well. So
Sure.
I could see it feeling unjustified. It did feel...
It seemed like there was like some kind of connection to his past life, and he said that this is Leonardo now in this life from this past life, and that's why I didn't quite understand as I was reading it. But yeah, it's super interesting that, like I said, Splinter has that line, but it's a bit blurred, and he even understands that. I think that's kind of
Yeah, I really like that stuff a lot. The whole Splinter using this as a lesson to Raphael while at the same time being caring for Casey as well. I loved everything about that stuff.
added to that, showing Raphael that he's just like him. Like
Yeah.
he has a part of him that's just like him. And that, to me, I think was just awesome.
Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, I feel like it was a very necessary connecting moment between Splinter and Raphael, because though they've had a couple moments, I mean, there's 18 months missing that the other turtles in Splinter have that
Right.
Raph didn't get.
Right. And so even though he had the bandana for him, and he had the size for him, there was still like that little bit of gap. And so not only this connection, but then again showing him he was the same in a lot of ways. We hop into another one shot here with April, and I just in my notes just wrote down like wanting to do more. Like she's watching everyone else like be cool and ninjas and whatnot, and she's like, "Well, what can I do?" And it is important to note in this series she has no affiliation with the news. She's not a reporter in any way, right?
At the moment, who knows?
Right, exactly, right. She at minimum doesn't have that connection right now, and so in the previous iterations, she was always April O'Neil, right? Channel 8, right? I think it was Channel 5, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And that yellow jumpsuit, and she's not in any of that. So
Well, she has. Doesn't she wear yellow?
she has a bit of the jackets.
Yeah.
There's definitely homages to it, that's for sure. So she decides to break into get into StockGen. She still can get in.
Yeah.
And she trips Chet, who becomes very important through this volume. I know we dropped hints in volume 1, but that'll all pay off here. Spilling coffee after seeing the turtle tracker. So that was a one shot that I didn't like. That I was like kind of weirded out about. That was from Donatello's one shot,
Yeah,
and I was like, it was okay. I guess we learned this, we learned about that, but yeah, we see the turtle tracker paying off here. She then breaks in that night and sees an Utrom soldier talking to Chet, who doesn't seem surprised by this, so she's confused, but now knows that Chet knows something. Now, what's really important about this, and to your point about how important these one-shots can be, is she gets away, but there is a mutant that is freed in her escape. I have the name written here. We're going to hold on to that name, but what were your thoughts when you saw a mutant? Did you know who the mutant was?
I was pretty sure I knew who it was.
Okay.
I still don't remember the name, even though you reminded me 10 minutes ago.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. I'm setting it up. We're building suspense. I thought this was such a really interesting way to bring this character in. This character is Slash.
Slash.
Yeah.
I'll remember that one day.
Yeah, one day. Not the guitarist, but Slash is been in a few iterations of the Turtles in the past, and in this story, Slash has been kind of a test case. They're trying to use the mutagen on different species, and Slash's whole job is to track the turtles down at all costs.
Which is established right in the following issue.
Yes.
After
yes.
April.
You're right. And 15, we do have issue 15 starting with a flashback.
It's might be worth noting, I believe April gets away with like a file of
She does,
ooze
like
or something.
Yes, like a thumb drive or something like that of information. Yes, that is true. So 15 starts with a flashback of the day they injected Slash, and how rapidly Slash picks up, and we jump to Mikey getting some pizza. He leaves, and something attacks the pizza guy. We don't really know.
What's the name of the pizza guy again?
That I did not write down in my notes. I apologize. I'm the worst. But
I'll look it up.
yeah.
Right
So,
now.
but he Slash attacks the pizza guy, and the turtles are on patrol during this and sees the mess that's been made by Slash. Sees kind of the carnage here, and through their patrol, did you find it?
Woody.
Woody.
His name's Woody.
Okay. While they're on patrol, they run into some criminals and hear Slash monsters for the first time. So that's really like the first proper time he's been named, so to say. But they are being they're being called Slash monsters. The people are thinking that they're just like Slash, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It becomes clear that Slash can smell the turtles, so the turtles go underground, which felt very much like almost like the third movie where they find that old like city hall like subway station kind of thing. And we end 15 with Slash catching up with them and cornering them very easily and overpowering them.
Because did Slash not destroy April's vehicle, but
I don't think it was
damage it?
I don't think it was April's vehicle, but a vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah. So they were seeing that carnage, so to say, and like his wake. And so we end on another cliffhanger in 15 with them, getting overpowered. And 16 I thought was an amazing issue for the turtles really developing themselves kind of out on their own, right? So the fight sequence is very quick, moves very fast, I thought. I think I mentioned in volume 1 how some of the animation style on this like gives you the same suspense and the same movement as a film sometimes.
Yeah.
And this is one of those instances. So very quickly, we see Mikey saving Leonardo. Slash is still too powerful. And then we cut back to a slower pace, which is, and I love this, by the way, Splinter is watching soap operas.
Yeah, I really like
I don't know why I love that so much, but Splinter is watching soaps. But April and Casey decide to go looking for the turtles to see if they're okay because they've been gone for a while. We cut back to the turtles finally coordinating their attack. You would think they would do that from the beginning. They would start to learn this, but they seem to do better when they coordinate their attacks together. Yeah. So they attack Slash, and then the internal debate starts amongst the turtles. This is really interesting. In the heat of battle, they are debating whether or not killing Slash is the right thing or not to do. Yeah. Where Splinter has just told them that we're going to need to kill Shredder. Well, maybe we need to kill Slash. We don't know. And 2 of them are on one side, 2 are in the other. Leo tries a sleeper hold on Slash, does not work. He tries reasoning with him, but then Slash is about to kill Mikey. Just at that moment, April and Casey find them, and that is when Leo jumps in and actually kills Slash.
Stabs him.
Stabs him, looks to put him out. He feels he's killed them.
Yeah.
The 4 of them feels they killed him. And I am the worst, but I do have that Woody can't give Mikey pizza anymore. Oddly enough, in my notes, I'm the worst. That's hilarious. They push Slash into the sewer to be kind of washed away in the sewer.
Or does he fall in? Or I thought he fell in, and that's why they assumed he was dead.
I think he put him down, and then they pushed him in. But
Okay.
we can look that up.
Could be.
And the reason I mention that, though, is that all of these turtles, all of our favorite turtles, seem to have taken this death differently.
Yeah.
And so Mikey takes it pretty hard. And Raphael calls him sensitive, and Splinter immediately disciplines Raphael for doing so. That Mikey's superpower is that he wants to be loved.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I forgot about that, but now that you're reminding me, like the feeling of reading that is kind of hitting me again.
Yeah.
That was like so good.
I thought it was so good in how quick he was to get on him and how direct he was with Raphael, how he's showing the same compassion that he showed Raphael in defending his brother.
Yeah.
I think there's something to this is what Mikey has always been missing in a lot of iterations of the Turtles, where he's always just been the party dude, as the jingle says, right? And he's always just been funny or wacky or something like that. This different dynamic as to why he is like that, I think is really an awesome addition.
Yeah. I loved that stuff.
And then that's followed up by Woody kind of abandoning Mikey, who was really his friend.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, out of his own safety, thinks that he can't, because Slash has, attacked him and ruined things, said that he can't associate with Mikey anymore and can't give him pizza anymore.
But he does. Well, I thought the letter was that he can't talk to him anymore, but every night he'll still leave them a pizza.
Yes, I think that's what it was. Yeah. But Mikey's, the timing of it made me feel like Mikey still was hurt by it.
Yeah.
Right? And that kind of thing. So, Leonardo is shaken by what he's done and meditating and everything. But I think the biggest cliffhanger, so to say, at the end of this issue is Hobbs finding Slash.
Yes.
And it's not very apparent at first who found Slash or whatnot. But, Hobbs finds him, and Slash is awake. I don't know if that's the mutagen or whatnot that regenerated him or something, but he is alive. So your take on that whole issue, there was a lot in that.
The stuff with Leo, all the stuff with the Turtles and their reaction to Slash's quote-unquote death was really interesting to me. And then the big reveal that it's Hob. I'm pretty confident it's Hob.
Hob?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Finding Slash and then being like, basically recruiting him.
Yeah.
I really liked all that.
I think there was something interesting that we didn't mention that's just coming back. Mikey really didn't want to kill Slash because he saw him as one of them. That he saw them as he had been mistreated by the same people that they were mistreated by. He had been experimented on by the same people, and he wanted to save him just because of a kinship with him. I thought that was a really interesting moment for Mikey as well. So, a lot in that. We are powering through. We're going to make it happen. We are into the Fugitoid. one shot.
Yeah.
What a crazy alien story. That is literally what my notes say.
Yeah,
Crazy alien story.
it is. So I think met the Fugitoid in the 2012 Turtles where I left off. I think, is that the one played by David Tennant?
I believe so, yes.
So I knew a little bit, but I don't know much about the Fugitoid. So I saw that was coming up, and I didn't know how I was going to feel about it, but it was a a big revelation, lots of story.
Yeah, and Fugitoid has like a long history with the Turtles franchise. I have an original Fugitoid issue 1 from the 80s. He is seen throughout the iterations of the Turtle, and even in The Last Ronin. He shows up, as Dr. Honeycutt, is what we find out in this one shot that we land on this planet we know nothing about, but we know that this Dr. Honeycutt was a part of a resistance against Krang. Krang finds them. Honeycutt gets everyone out, but he transfers himself from his body to the Fugitoid, to the droid, to get through some flames, only to see his family killed, from that base. He runs from Granitor and the Stone Army, the Stone Soldiers, to New York City and blends in to escape.
Like he goes through a portal just to.
Right. He doesn't just like run down the block. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He runs through a portal, and I think it lands them in Times Square in the story. You can kind of sense that it's Times Square a bit.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But
and he blends in, gets away, and he decides to take on the form of a person named Chet and start working for Stockman, knowing that Krang would target Stockman.
I don't remember. Does the Fugitoid, I guess, robot or what have you, is there a glitch in it that makes him have the stutter, or did something happen which damaged him and gave him a stutter?
I believe there's a glitch in the software.
Okay.
Because that does get resolved eventually.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the two most important things, first off, Fugitoid, fugitive droid, catchy. That's where that comes from. They mentioned it at that point.
Yeah.
So we're not just making up this word, Fugitoid.
Yeah.
And the two things in this is, yes, you have a bit of his backstory, and the resistance becomes really important later. But that he intentionally starts working with Stockman to work against Krang, and then decides to start working with the Foot and Shredder to take down Krang as well.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting way he's sort of like a Nexus character, that all roads lead to Chet, as we know him, or Dr. Honeycutt.
Yeah.
But still a crazy alien story.
Yeah. It is such a left turn from anything we've had in this specific series so far. It's a little jarring. It's good, but it is a little jarring.
Yeah, I'm sensing that pattern a couple times where you are thrown these curveballs, and as you're reading it, you're just going to have to extend a little bit of faith. You're just going to have to extend a little bit of trust with it. To me, I don't know about you, but I've been paid off for that faith that I've put out. Like, I've been paid off for that curveball, or putting in that trust. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I'd say yes for the most part, though we'll get into it, but I'm kind of mixed on the stuff on Outram, or however you pronounce that.
Outram, yeah.
Outram. I'm kind of mixed on that stuff.
Sure.
But I do think this was very interesting and satisfying payoff for Chet as a character, though we still get a lot more with him. But
right. So speaking a lot more, we're already into issue 17 here, and another left turn. We're on this planet Neutrino battling against Krang. The neutrinos are saying they need to find Professor Honeycutt, to protect the royal family. Jump back to Earth, and Splinter is rallying everyone into action. April saying she has a plan. We jump back to Krang. Krang's bringing Stockman to Neutrino to show him his destruction, show him what he's capable of, to bring fear to Stockman that he really needs to deliver what he's promised.
Yeah.
We cut over to Karai, and she's gearing up to find Leonardo. And we cut to April's plan is that she decides she needs to meet with Chet. Looks like Central Park, something like that. And Turtles and Casey are on the stakeout. You can see Casey's like protective nature, like really kicking into overdrive here, having a bad feeling about this, all those, tropes and that kind of thing. And April is trying to get Chet to tell her about all the secret stuff that he knows at StockGen that's going on. And just as he's about to crack, an intergalactic portal shows up. The neutrinos show up through the portal, announcing Dr. Honeycutt that it's time to go home. And so it's the first time Dr. Honeycutt is Chet. Chet is Dr. Honeycutt to this point. And it's at that moment that the Turtles and Casey jump in. Casey pulling April out. And in the fight, the Turtles all get teleported with the neutrinos and Honeycutt back to Neutrino. So that left turn seems to land on Earth for a moment, and then we're in 18 just back on Neutrino right away. So interesting kind of like updating kind of episode, issue to me on where everything is. But, I personally like what's coming up. What happens next on Neutrino through the end of this volume, at least in like the main line of the volume, I think to me was really awesome in a lot of ways and just downright fun. If the like main big fight scene in volume 1 felt like very serious and grounded, and important and almost regal in a way with the connection of feudal Japan and everything like that. This is just as important, just as intense, but a little bit more fun because you're on this like alien planet where different things are happening.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on 17?
At this point, I was very interested in kind of what was going on. I mean, we had an idea because of the Fugitoid issue, but and it was an exciting cliffhanger of an issue to have the Turtles be taken to
just zapped, right in front of Casey and April,
and they're freaked out. They have to go tell Splinter,
right? Yes, actually, and that comes up next in 18 here. So the Turtles have arrived, but the battle has continued on Neutrino, and the Turtles are completely confused by this fighting. And they pretty quickly decide to work together with the neutrinos for everyone to get to safety, and then we'll ask questions later.
Yeah.
And you promise to explain stuff to us. The very first time we have seen Splinter rage this bad, like that, the art style of that, and like the emotion jumping off the page was just intense. Saying something like he lost his boys again and he wasn't there. April and Casey saying what happened and apologizing profusely. But that really struck me. Splinter just absolutely raging out.
He really, it was crazy to see.
It was startling. I mean, but awesome. I mean, but startling. We have April deciding to dig deeper at StockGen. But back on Neutrino, the princess gets kidnapped. And this is the first time you see Mikey being the Mikey that pretty much everyone like has the idea of who Mikey is.
The king and queen also was kidnapped.
Right. We don't find that though. We don't find that out until Mikey saves the princess, only to find out that the king and queen were still on board.
Oh, okay.
Oh
yes.
which is
Now I
like that
remember.
little bit of twist there. Spoiler alert, which is our whole point of this podcast, anyways. Right. The biggest spoiler alert, right in the middle of the podcast. I'll say that.
Spoilers, everyone.
Yeah, everyone. Just so you know. Yeah, Mikey jumps in, but I think the thing that I was mentioning about Mikey is this is the first time you see the fawning over a girl Mikey, right?
Yeah.
Like the very flirtatious, like I'll save the princess,
Yeah.
kind of Mikey, right? And we hadn't really seen that yet, but kind of to my point before with Splinter admonishing, Raphael and explaining who Mikey is and wanting to be love. This feels a little bit more grounded, rather than him just being flirtatious, so to say. So that makes that more understandable, I think, or more digestible. But yeah, so he saves the princess only to find out that the king and queen were still on board the getaway plane. Back on Earth, April is breaking into StockGen to find out and finds out about Krang and Burnout Island, but is being spied on by Karai during this whole infiltration. And back on Neutrino, we have the Turtles finding out definitively who Chet is, or Professor Honeycutt, and his backstory and everything that's important there, and his plans to thwart Kang from within StockGen.
Krang. You said Kang.
Did I say Kang, the cockroach? Yeah. Krang. So I actually do a decent Krang impression, by the way, from like the original show. And he's like, Shredder. It's my favorite. And Richard Avery playing Shredder, like Philip Banks. That's the best.
Yeah.
So I digress. But on the monitors, we have Krang appearing with the king and queen, basically telling the princess to surrender.
Yeah.
And that's where we end 18.
Well, no, he wasn't telling the princess to surrender. He was telling Professor or Dr. Honeycutt.
That is right.
Yeah.
Is it Professor or Doctor? Because I feel like I've used that interchangeably.
We could just do Professor Dr. Honeycutt.
Yeah, I'll just keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
It's not like we don't have the books in front of us or anything. But yes, it is very important for Krang to get the Professor / Doctor, the Fugitoid, to help him with his weapon, his ultimate weapon, to bend his will.
Yeah.
So that's what's really important to Krang. That's what he wants in his life. Which would then end up conquering Neutrino, but then terraforming Earth. I think that's like the series of events that the Turtles are learning about. 19 kicking off with Krang having the king and queen. Turtles and Neutrinos are really not sure what to do, so I've written now Professor Honeycutt. He immediately wants to surrender himself and just give up. And the princess, by royal decree, basically, which is funny enough, kind of what she does throughout this whole next couple of issues, is like, I'm doing what I want because I have a crown. Does not allow it. And it's decided that Honeycutt's going to make the weapon operational, which you don't know what this weapon is. And of course, Donatello, he does the machines, so he has to go help. And he's super excited about that. And the other three decide to help the Neutrinos create a diversion on one side while a small team infiltrates from the other side to save the king and queen.
Yeah, Raphael goes on the side of sort of blunt force, distracting them very head on, while Mikey is sort of there in this specific case just to look after the princess. He
definitely does.
Bodyguard, and then Leo's sort of the leader of the strike. And
yes, along with the commander, and then the princess demands that she goes with them as well to save her parents. we do find out that Donatello is getting to help with what is called the End Missile, which stands for Electronics Nullifying Device. So it's very important to the neutrino people that it was a non-lethal missile that would kill all of the electronics for the whole military.
Well, for Krang specifically, it's specifically wired to only take out Krang's
Army.
army.
Yeah, Krang's army and their ability to fight.
Yeah.
So they could win even with lower numbers and firepower. With the diversion beginning with Raphael, there's a cool moment with Raphael and Leo kind of fist bumping. See you after the butt kicking. I thought that was a cool little moment between them. The diversion begins, and I mean it works almost immediately. That Krang orders a counterattack, a full-on counterattack to them, and the diversion works as the break-in starts. And issue 20, I'm going to pause here because the issue 20, has quite a bit going on in the back and forth. But I think the issue 19 is where they fix the stuttering of the Fugitoid.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah.
And they find an assistant that the Fugitoid hadn't seen since.
Yeah.
And he has like a droid arm. Reminding me of Star Wars a little bit, to be honest with you. Just like the missing arm.
Yeah.
They get to work on the missile, get it going. But they're still not sure, even after launch in the next issue, if it's going to work.
Yeah. Leap of faith, basically.
Leap of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have issue 20. We still have the diversion happening. It's a huge fight breaks out. And then we have a fight inside the main stronghold between Krang and Granitor, one of the stone soldiers, while the king and queen. To Leo's credit, those katanas must be pretty sharp because somehow he cut off one of Krang's arms. Mikey fights the stone soldier, seems to put him down. All the while, the commander and princess are able to get the king and queen away. Just as Donatello and Honeycutt are finishing the end missile, Raphael and neutrinos are getting pinned down, can't run anymore. And then we cut to a break-in being discovered on Burnout Island.
Well, I think throughout the last couple of issues, or one of them, you see the break. You see Karai.
I did skip over that. I did have a note about that. Yes, yeah. She breaks in. She commands someone to let her in. She escapes with an ooze canister after killing one of the Utrams.
Yeah.
And burn now. Yes.
Yeah.
I did skip over that in my notes here. But it's in issue 20 that the break-in is discovered and that they need to notify Stockman and Krang of that break-in. Yes, and that's where you see the escape that she escaped with the ooze was in issue 20 specifically. Leo and Mikey are still fighting, and Krang's just not slowing down. Leo's trying to encourage Mikey not to quit and attack together. I thought that was an interesting moment. Mikey just not necessarily quitting, but just like, what, this guy keeps coming. What are we going to do? And, Leo kind of sharing his resolve with him to keep going. Raph and Neutrino are still fighting, but not sure how much longer they can hold them. And that's when the end missile is launched. Still not sure it's going to work. Cut back to the main fight scene. Mikey is dodging lasers. And then out of nowhere, the stone soldier that Mikey put down earlier in the fight shoots the neutrino commander and tells everyone basically to freeze. I did think it was a very Mikey line, like, I should have hit that guy harder, right? Yeah. With the nunchucks. Just as, outside on the diversion, the Raph and the neutrino are about to give up when they see the end missile arrive. But then they quickly realize that this massive Krang robot might be able to swat the end missile out of the sky. So Raph jumps in and shoots its leg with a cannon, and that gives the end missile enough time to go off and kill all the electronics of the Krang army.
Yeah.
And Krang thinks he's won because he's pinned down Mikey. And let's see. Yeah, Honeycutt and the rest of the gang arrive from the diversion and the end missile. And that is where they tell Krang it's over. The end missile, has taken out all of your electronics. And then it's revealed that Krang, his specific weapons are on a different frequency, and that he will kill Mikey in front of them if Honeycutt doesn't surrender at that moment. So against some protesting, Honeycutt surrenders, and they immediately transport them out to Burnow. We end with the neutrinos thanking the turtles, and we hop back to Earth. And very interesting, like almost because of the nature of comics and how you have to draw these things, almost felt like a slow motion. They were about to have their first kiss kind of thing, and as that's about to happen, they can't believe they lost the turtles. There's a big zap, and all the turtles are back on Earth, and that's how they come back.
I thought it happens earlier. I forgot to mention it. I did think it was kind of interesting. I don't know how I feel about it, but the way that teleporting works is that it's basically cloning them. Like
so it was a copy paste kind of thing. Yes.
So it's sort of every time. So the original turtles we have are sort of dead, and now it's copies of them. I mean,
they're
the same, but I
Right.
just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, he did. I think that conversation comes up while Donatello is working with Honeycutt on the end missile.
Yeah.
They talk about how the teleportation works.
And how it's actually a very important moment because Donatello is telling him about how they are reincarnated or might be, and Donatello thinks it's ridiculous.
Right.
And doesn't believe it. And Honeycutt explains how this works and how it could kind of explain how reincarnation could actually
For sure.
exist, and that Donatello sort of needs to open his mind to it.
And I think that was this whole last few issues, was this whole other dimension, this whole other planet, all of this different technology that would have never, he would have never believed or anything or considered.
Yeah.
I think it's super interesting for his journey as well. That fight scene, to me, and how it's drawn on the page, I've said it once, I've said it a couple times, I thought the action in that was fantastic. I really love the animation style, how it was drawn, the movement. There were a couple of, across the fold cells that, which made it always makes it a little bit tricky to read, right? You might have to read things a couple times.
Yeah.
But just that sense of movement throughout the fight, and the jumping back and forth and the fog of war that they were trying to portray, going back and forth between the two offensives happening, I thought was really interesting. And to me, like I said, matched in a lot of ways Volume 1's kind of climax. But again, had that little bit more fun added to it.
Yeah.
So that ends like this volume. I would have thought that this would be a nice rounding point for this volume.
Yeah.
But we still have 5 more issues to go.
Isn't it 6?
6 more issues to go. Yes. Yeah.
Because
We have 2 1-shots and then the
Four-part.
the history of the Foot Clan. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm okay with it. I think the next 2 issues, the one-shots, sort of work well as an epilogue to this story. But But in terms of number of issues, I understand why the history of the
Right.
Foot Clan is in this. But really, that is the setup and start of the next volume's
Right.
story.
And what this left this fight scene to me being so well done, and saving the princess, and then the cliffhanger of Honeycutt. Like, I want to know what happens next in that story. And these next 6 issues, I found myself just like kind of getting through them to get back to the main story in some ways.
Yeah, I was okay with it just because I enjoyed the stuff on Utrom, is that right?
Yeah.
Or Neutrino, whatever it is. But I don't know. It's not. I don't know how to feel about it. I liked it, but I preferred the more kind of grounded New York stuff.
Sure. Sure.
So I was okay going back to that.
Sure. I think this story of the Battle of Neutrino and that kind of thing sets up an alliance for later on.
Yeah,
right? Like, that's what it felt like, especially with the king and queen being so thankful for them and helping them. I think to me, that's how I read it.
Yeah,
as well.
I enjoyed it, but I was happy to get back to the more grounded. It doesn't feel like the right word.
Street
because-
level, almost. Yeah. Well, speaking of, tell me what you think about Krang and his one shot. Because I could take it or leave it on that one, personally.
It was fine. I mean, I guess it gave us some backstory for Krang and how he went from just being a prince who couldn't really do anything for himself to becoming the leader that is Krang. It was fine. I don't think it was a super necessary story to tell. I feel like we didn't really learn anything that we couldn't have just put together with how he acts.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I don't always need a backstory for all my villains.
Yeah,
Like I get that he wants to avenge his father, let's say, or he wants to take over again what was once theirs, and like, to me, that's just enough. You know,
Yeah.
that this wasn't exactly necessary to me, but you do find out that like he now knows that someone has gotten away with the break-in with the ooze, and Utram has died, and then the ending is him, just mercilessly killing a guard for disturbing him, and asking if he needs help.
And he kills that guard because he feels like the guard doesn't have enough fear of him.
Right.
It's a fine one shot. I felt like it was an easy read. It was kind of interesting, but it wasn't super necessary. I think the Baxter one was a lot more interesting to me. Because
Sure.
going into the stuff with his dad and why Baxter's the way he is, much more interesting and necessary, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. I think Baxter's kind of interesting to me because I forget that actor's name, but he reminds me of the actor from the Daniel Craig Bond, Felix, the guy who plays Felix in like Skyfall and his movies.
I don't remember.
He's like the CIA operative. He's drawn very similar to him. He's an interesting evil to me, right? Because if he was left to his own devices, he'd do evil things, right?
Yeah.
But he is made to do much more evil things by Krang in a lot of ways, and forced to work on the mutagen and forced to do all of these things, which you get a sense he may or may not want to do, but he certainly hates that he's like under Krang's thumb to begin with. But to your point about the chess match with his father is kind of the allegory for how Stockman is trying to work within Krang and work one step ahead of him. I think that's a super interesting analogy, and the art style really, really interesting as well.
And then he also he like creates this mutant fly, which is a reference to him becoming a fly in
Right.
all. It happens in most of the iterations. I feel like
Most of them, yes. And I mean, I think the movie was the first one, Mutant Mayhem, rather, was
Yeah.
the first time where he didn't turn into that, but there was still that connection there.
Yeah. But so he does that, and that fly sort of just goes berserk, and then you see Baxter asking Krang for help and pretending to be helpless, but it turns out it was sort of all a part of his plan to get access to information on Krang and what's going
Right.
on with him.
And that again lines up with that kind of chess metaphor that's set up at the beginning of this one shot.
And then at the ending of that one shot, you have him going up to his dad and basically being like, "You've been pushed out of Stock Gen."
Yes.
By the board, and his dad just
saying, "Hey, I won," and that's what it's all about,
Yeah.
right, Dad? You know, I thought that was very interesting. So that's what I mean by like he's an interesting evil in that, yes, left to his own devices, he would do evil things, but he's having to work within this this whole evil that's being imposed upon him.
Yeah.
So that brings us to
Your
secret
favorite
history.
issues
Yeah.
of the entire book.
Some of the weirdest things I think are in the secret history of the Foot Clan. Not, I will say though, there is a new series coming out, the Untold History of the Foot Clan, that I'm suspecting would be part of like a volume 16 or 17 or something like that.
Probably.
Eventually,
17.
but it's supposed to be in spirit a sequel to this. The Untold History is supposed to be a sequel to the Secret History.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'd hope, because,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like now we're getting a little too much Untold or Secret History.
yeah, exactly.
Because I feel like we keep getting more and more information, and I kind of like these issues, but it did sort of it felt like a retcon.
Okay.
Like it just, when I was reading it doesn't feel like it quite matches up with what happened in some of the other flashbacks, which, I mean, it's fine, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
But the flashback stuff I didn't really care about, but I was having a lot of fun with the current time stuff.
Right. I mean, so I think we can kind of summarize all four of these issues at once. We can
Yeah.
hit the high points in each one as we do normally. But I will say in the first issue here, there is this sort of like Indiana Jones-ish character standing in front of a podium, right? Like, and the turtles are in the back, in the rafters trying to listen into him. That feels a little bit like, to me anyways, felt like Indy, being his professor self at the front. And he's talking about this secret Foot Clan organization and their secret artifacts and things like that. And it appears that Shredder is kind of onto him as to like he knows a lot more than most people have.
Yeah.
And so we have a bunch of flashbacks here. And one of which, not to be understated, is a kind of Alapex-looking character, but it's not Alapex. It's it's a Kitsune, I believe. I think that was the name of it. I'm trying to see how to pronounce it here.
I could try to help, but I'm not gonna even.
Right?
I'm not gonna be able.
Right?
I'll let you. Trying to.
But this demon, kind of explains to Shredder that he is basically like a constant figure throughout time.
Yeah.
That just goes from timeline to timeline to timeline.
He's a fixed point in time.
Yes.
To reference Loki.
Yes, that Nexus being, yeah. Which I thought was kind of interesting because I think it's Michelangelo that says it, that like basically he's unkillable. So they've decided that they need to kill the Shredder, but now he's unkillable. Like, how do you stop that? I'm sure they're gonna come up with something that like makes that happen, and like in the Secret of the Foot, like how you can break that chain or something. That's kind of what I'm banking on, anyways. But you see throughout the secret history of the Foot Clan here. They kidnap that professor. He has an artifact that the Shredder believes belongs to him. They try to reason with him, try to work with him. The Turtles break in and save him, which I thought was really cool to see the party van, to see the turtle van in its iteration here throughout. But yeah, we end on another fight with Karai and Alapex, and them ending up splitting up towards the end.
I thought it was kind of interesting in the final battle. I think it's this one where they're held up in I don't know if it's a hotel or something, and then Splinter, they're waiting for an attack, and Shredder and the Foot are outside calling them out, and then Splinter kind of has this flashback and remembers, I don't know if he was taught something. I think he remembers something the Foot used to do, and
Yes.
gets attacked from the back and tells him to look out, and then it's sort of a little too late.
Yes, like he sees that tactic. Yes, and how that's playing out.
Yeah.
But there is a brief fight between Splinter and Shredder, and we land with them getting a hold of that artifact and that book. There's a fun joke there. He calls it a footnote. Right, and
This if you're wondering why this recap is a lot less put together, it's because Chris didn't like it so much that he just didn't do any recap.
I did not outline them. I reread them. I did not outline them because I felt like they were written so differently that I was like, how do I even outline these things?
Like, we should also probably mention there's a very important key element of this, of a book.
Oh yeah, there's a book. Well, it was the artifact that the Indiana Jones character had.
Yeah.
Did I mention that? Did I fail to mention that?
I think you did mention an artifact, but it was a book with information.
Yes, but Splinter decides that this book does not need to exist.
Oh yeah, actually a very key moment happens where Michelangelo starts to read it and be like, this is very interesting stuff.
And they're like, how do you know Japanese?
And they all look at him in shock.
Right. And then they believe they're reincarnated just a little bit more. Yes.
And I don't know. I really had fun with these issues. I know you didn't like them.
I just hope that they will pay off. I trust that they will. It's just it comes from the feeling that I had at the end of that big fight with Krang, where I was just like, I want to hear more about that. And it's like, oh wait, pause, read 6 issues.
The one thing I feel like I want to check writer wise, it's weird to me that it's written by someone that's not Tom Waltz, and that these really almost should have just been issues of the main book, because even as soon as, like, immediately in volume 3, things become, you start to, the stuff set up in this immediately comes into play.
Right.
And I imagine Mikey knowing Japanese is going to be very important. And then the Indiana Jones type guy, who I don't remember his name, I think he will probably end up being very important. And all of the figure that sort of helped him reincarnate, that woman, She will come back into play. I guess that's spoilers. I didn't even think about it.
It's all good.
But a lot of things are going to become very important. I think it's also worth noting, very big thing that happens in this. Krang is the person who's providing the stuff that is keeping Shredder young in the past.
Right. Yes.
And I think I don't know if it's Shredder or one of his previous incarnations, but or Orokusaki rather. But when Krang shows up at one point, the last time he does, or someone, might not be Krang, but
Maybe another Utram or something like that. Yeah, from the previous time.
He gets kind of Orokusaki or whichever version of him was kind of attacks him and pushes him and gets him out because he's done bowing to...
Yes, he's over, and this deal is over, demon, I think he says.
And I think it's worth mentioning, maybe the most important thing to happen in this issue is that one of the turtles calls them shuriken, and I was right.
That is what we are going to end on, is that Nolan was right.
Yes, I was right.
Okay, there we go. Shuriken, not ninja stars. Yeah, got it. Awesome. Well, Nolan, I think that brings us to the end of Volume 2 of the IDW collection. Splinter is on the cover. If you are as excited about Turtles as us and want to read along or are interested in getting into the Turtles, we're going to be releasing every other week, I think is our release schedule now.
Yeah.
So you have some time to catch up or, read at your own pace, listen at your own pace. I think, hopefully you can enjoy these anytime. Or you can just listen here as we get ready for that relaunch with Jason Aaron issue 1 coming in July.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are interested in purchasing any of these, either the omnibus or the single issues, come on down to the Arcade Comics on East State Street in North Central Fort Wayne. Talk to Craig. Tell him Cowabunga.
Yeah.
He might say Cowabunga back.
He might not.
Yeah. Shane
He's
will...
a bit of a rebel like that.
That is true. Shane will regale you, though, with as many movie quotes as possible.
Yeah.
He will definitely do that. So if you want to talk Turtles, just ask for the Turtle Guy. I'm Chris. That's usually how I've been referred to. But, yeah, write in as well. If we can get just one person to write into this podcast, that would be one more person than the mainline podcast. That would be amazing.
Yeah, that would be great.
And if you don't like it, our names are Craig and Shane. But if you do like it, I'm Chris, and this is Nolan. Yeah. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Cowabunga.
Cowabunga.
The Cowabunga Chronicles is sponsored by StockGen Laboratories, hosted by Chris and Nolan, and produced by the Arcade Comics. If you are interested in the TMNT IDW collection or pulling the new Jason Aaron TMNT series that releases July 10th, both are 20% off and include free bags and boards. Be sure to pull the series before final order cutoff only at the Arcade Comics on East State Boulevard in Fort Wayne, Indiana.